Doesn't it? We'll touch on some of those outgoings that Melissa spoke about there in just a moment. But Kwaku, just to start on Calafiori, I mean, he's a young player. He's clearly got a lot of potential. He's versatile as well. I mean, he was wanted by Real Madrid. You can kind of see why Arsenal have moved so quick to get him.
Yeah, definitely. Highly coveted, like you said. Real Madrid are keen, Juventus as well. And I think for Arsenal, it's as much about getting the player as well as keeping him away from other big clubs as well. He was linked with Liverpool briefly at the beginning of the window. And he's a player that excelled at the Euros. Performed really well despite his young age, 22 years old. Got a crucial assist for them in the game against Croatia. That saw them through their group. And so he's a player that brings a lot of quality to this already stacked Arsenal side. And if you look at Arsenal, they've made so many defensive signings under Mikel Arteta over the last 3 or 4 seasons, and this is just reinforcement. He will come in to start, I think, but this is also a squad bolstering signing. He's a player that can slot in at left back, he can slot in at left centre back. You know how resilient Saliba and Gabriel were last season. But he's a player that just brings an added quality on the ball and can offer something a little bit different in terms of going forward. We saw it at the Euros. And this is an Arsenal team that did have the best defence in the league last year. This is only going to make them better. And this is a sign of intent from Mikel Arteta. Arsenal come so close in terms of winning the title over the last couple of seasons. I'm not necessarily saying it's title or bust for Arsenal this year, but it's a season where they know they have to bring in major silverware. And he's the player that's going to help them do that.
I mean, you've mentioned there just how stacked they are defensively. On the kind of flip side, Sam, do Arsenal even need him?
I think it depends on how you look at it, because like Kwaku said, they had the best defence in the league. You know, they had a very stable defence as well. Gabriel and Saliba didn't miss many games, Ben White as well. But I think on that left-hand side, I think that they were struggling to find consistency there. But when you look at Yuri and Timber coming back into the side and the fact that, you know, he only played 71 minutes in the league last season, but when he did play, Arsenal fans were raving about him because you saw his quality and he's still only 23 years old. So that's basically a new signing for them. And Mikel Arteta spoke recently talking about how good he is and the fact that he's one of the leaders. And I think when you have such a young defence and you're bringing in another young defender, it's like, where is he going to play? Where is he going to play? Is it going to ruin the harmony? Because I remember that at the start of last season, you know, Arteta was trying to see if Gabriel needed to start, and then they realised he did. And, you know, they had the best defence in the league. So it's an interesting one, but like we always hear and say, you know, defences wins leagues, and they were so close last season. So maybe this is the signing that will push them over the edge.
We were sort of talking off camera. You're on the side of the argument of, yes, this is a brilliant signing for Arsenal.
I mean, I like to spend my mornings convincing Sam of my opinions. So hence I'm going to head to the board and try and do that even further. But I'm really excited by Calafiori. I think a lot of people who watched him in the Euros, apart from Sam, think he's a very exciting talent. And Bologna had a really good season last year. He was the standout man in that defence. But I think there's a much deeper look into this. But he's essentially first in absolutely everything. And that's because he was the rock at the back. He's the best in possession as well. And I think Arsenal will benefit from a lot of that when we look at the next set of stats, where obviously they've had issues at left-back, but I think the issues have been not only off the ball, but also on the ball. And I think what he brings into this side is a defender who likes to defend in wide areas. And just look at these stats. So the progressive carries, you'll notice Zinchenko is essentially a unicorn in this sense because he's a midfielder playing left-back. But every other stat, Calafiori is the standout over Kivior, Gabriel and Zinchenko. The reason I put Gabriel in there, if I could say his name, that'd be handy, is because I think he'll actually play left-back and he'll play left centre-back against teams that sit in and you have to play through them, because one of his traits is to pinch the ball in front of an attacker and then get his team playing. You saw that in one of the goals that they scored in the Euros, and I think that's the exciting side of his game. He also then brings that sort of composure, the word that kids use on social media, the aura at the back that I think Arsenal have plenty of in Saliba already. He'll bring that in as well. And although Arsenal do have a lot of defensive options, he's very unique. He's a bit of a throwback Italian defender. He's someone who wants to be aggressive, wants to be front-footed, wants to win duels, but also then once he's got the possession, he's not going to, with all due respect to Kiwior, he is essentially a centre-back at left-back. Same with Nathan Ake maybe at Manchester City. He's very much so someone who can get the ball at left-back, come in field like Zinchenko does, or drop in into the centre-back position if the defence is moving out to the right-hand side with Ben White. So it makes you a little bit more tactically fluid. And Arsenal's defence, as we said, was outstanding last season. 29 goals conceded. Only Manchester City conceded less than them. And obviously Liverpool were the other closest challengers, conceded 41. So if Arsenal shave off 2 or 3 goals that they maybe shouldn't have conceded last season with Calafiori in there, and have that addition of someone who can be front-footed and get you in possession and play out from that left-hand side, then the balance that they missed without Xhaka, he probably brings that in there. And for £42 million, I think is an absolute bargain. So the question I have to ask you, Sam, is, are you convinced?
Some of those stats up there, because the joint top defensive goal scorer of 2. I don't know if that's really a stat. How good he's going to be.
It's a good signing, and I think sometimes we look at it with like different goggles and saying, if they have that money, maybe they can use it in other areas. But at the same time, you don't always have to wait for your defence to get worse to add quality to it. So I can understand it. And like you said, 42 million after what he'd done at the Euros is a great signing. So yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see how Arteta kind of juggles the defence, because I'm sure the defence that they have now are all going to be thinking going into next season we're starting, especially Jurrien Timber, because he's also a quality player, so it's going to be interesting.
He's a mentality monster as well. He's a player that suffered 2 really devastating knee injuries at the beginning of his career. One of them was near career ending. And the fact that he's managed to come back, he's played at different levels as well, shows that he's got that resilience. At 22 years old as well, he's got that experience where he gives you that sense that he's got the experience and the know-how and the tactical awareness that only more mature players have. And so I think that he comes into the side and he does start. And in terms of Jurrien Timber, there's been talks from Arsenal about him playing maybe in a more central position in midfield. And I feel that will facilitate Calafiori coming in. But like we can all agree here, I think he's the player that brings so much quality. And for Arsenal, it's almost in the model of Man City. When Pep Guardiola first came to City, he signed so many defensive players, year after year after year, until he got it right. I think that Arsenal follow in those footsteps.
It's just options. Like, you need flexibility. The one thing we always say about Guardiola's teams is he's got a big squad. But actually, I don't think he's got a big squad. I think he's got lots of options. Bernardo Silva plays 5 different positions. Stones can play along the back 4. Walker can play in different positions. There's just so many players that he can just put here and put there. And I think Arteta's gone, we need that flexibility. And let's not forget, Arsenal were very lucky with injuries last season. If you think about their starting 11, they were fairly lucky. The luck will run out at some point.
Also, Quaco made a good point earlier as well, saying it was it's kind of a sign of intent, really, from Arsenal. The fact that, look, they're backing Arteta and they're ready to go again, Nabeed.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the other challengers, whether you're Liverpool or Chelsea or whoever, maybe not Chelsea, but other potential challengers that want to get involved in this race, and Arsenal are going and buying the standout player at the Euros, and then they're linked to Miko Marino at a very good Euros as well, they're not playing about. And I think in previous years, you've seen Liverpool have sort of stalled in a transfer window and not managed to catch City. I think City have to be looking over their shoulders now and saying they really do mean business. And like Quaker said, it's not title or bust, but soon it will be. And I think Arsenal are working towards that.
Yeah. Melissa mentioned some of the sort of potential outgoings. Emil Smith-Rowe is the big one involved in this likely £27 million move to Fulham. She mentioned Reece Nelson as well, Eddie Nketiah. So there could be a number of players on the way out this month.
Yeah, it's the trend of these top clubs selling off academy prospects to balance the books. Emil Smith-Rowe was great for Arsenal 2 or 3 seasons ago when they were struggling, maybe 4 seasons ago, when they were struggling in 15th place around Christmas time. Him and Bukayo Saka were the linchpins of that side that really dragged them out of that position. Hasn't worked out for him over the last couple of seasons because of injuries. And so you can understand why for him and the club, a fresh start is best for all options. Eddie Nketiah is a player that, Nabeed mentioned it before when we were on earlier, about how he's a great second option, but he's never going to be a leading man for Arsenal. And so he's a player that wants to get more playing time, so you can understand why he'd be looking for a move as well. Marseille seems like a good option for a player like that. And Reece Nelson, similar, linked to Leicester, a player that would like to get more minutes. This is an Arsenal side that are going into a different phase. This is an Arsenal side that are trying to win the biggest trophies in the world. And no disrespect to these players, these are quality players, but this is an Arsenal team that are bolstering their squad with the likes of a Calafiori, who was one of the best players at the Euros. And so there's going to be limited playing time for those players. And so you can understand why, both for the club and the players in question, why it's time to move on. But Emil Smith-Rowe to Fulham, that's a great signing for Fulham. And around £35 million, which would be a record sale for Arsenal, which is crazy in terms of the amount of quality players they've let go. It represents good business for both him as a player in terms of a new start and for the club as well.
Yeah, £27 million as well. That would be a club record, wouldn't it? Lastly, because you mentioned options a minute ago, having options, Mikel Arteta wanting options in different areas. Aaron Ramsdale kind of became an option in goal last season. What do you see happening with him?
I'd imagine he wants to play first-team football because I think although it was made out that they were 1 and 2 last season, Raya immediately came in and became 1 pretty quickly. And I think for Aaron Ramsdale, he's shown that he can play in the Premier League. I don't think he's a bad goalkeeper. Obviously, narratives change when someone else comes in. But I think if you want to win a league, you need a very consistent goalkeeper. David Raya is exactly that. And maybe Ramsdale wasn't as consistent at times. But ultimately, he's still a top keeper. He's still an England choice, and he wants to be an England choice. And maybe you want to push for #1 again. So you'd imagine he gets a move.
Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about Manchester United. Before we do that, I'm just going to bring you a quick update. I'm going to try anyway. We've had a couple of updates from Old Trafford this morning. First of all, talks are advancing with Bayern Munich over right-back Nusser Mazraoui. He is keen to join the club and personal terms are not expected to be a problem. Now, his potential arrival could well depend on Aaron Wan-Bissaka leaving the club. And while United discuss Mazraoui with Bayern, talks are also open over Matthias de Ligt. Now, United need to create squad space and budget as well. Victor Lindelof could be key here. United going to the market again in that position is likely to depend on departures rather than the injury sustained by Lenny Yoro. Right, let's talk a little bit about United now then. I mentioned that injury there. Yoro injured in that pre-season game against Arsenal. A huge blow, Kwaku, because it's like they've just made this brilliant signing who's got such potential, and then the first game.
Devastating. It was such a coup for Manchester United as well. This is a player that was heavily linked with Real Madrid. It seemed like he wanted to go to the club, and Manchester United managed to convince him to come to United. Paid big money for him, and he's got huge potential. He was really good at Lille last season, and the fact that he's got injured in pre-season is devastating to Manchester United, who are looking for a partner alongside Lisandro Martinez. That's what they're looking for. Obviously, Varane's left the club. He's now signed for Como, and so they need that right-sided centre-back, and that was supposed to be Yoro. You mentioned there the other players they're linked with. Matthias de Ligt is still only 24 years old, got incredible experience for a player so young. But Yoro's injury is definitely going to be a big blow for Manchester United because he's a player that's comfortable on the ball. He's got some size to him. Of course, he's still very young, and young centre-backs in the Premier League, it tends to take him a little while to get bedded in. But he's a player that has incredible potential, and the fact that they now have to look at other options to replace him potentially, depending on how bad his injury is a big blow to the club.
Yeah, he looked so good as well in his first game versus Rangers. I saw so many compilations from United fans just raving about his composure, his speed, and I think it's just unfortunate because they had so many injuries last season, and this is like the worst way to start a new season. But at the same time, hopefully it's nothing too long term and he'll be able to, come back straight away.
Yeah, especially in the fence as well. We'll get on to maybe some of those potential incomings in just a moment. But just to talk about some other positive news, Joshua Zirkzee, United fans should be really excited about this signing.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of these players that I think for a while, a lot of people have spoken about him a lot. He's been linked with loads of clubs, but he's never actually had a moment or a season where people have gone, oh, this is what he's about. And obviously at Bologna last season, I mean, Thiago Motta did a brilliant job because he unearthed all these gems in this team, and now they're all getting moves away. I think the one thing I do think about a little bit is whether he can coexist with Højlund. So when he first signed, immediately I thought, for me, Højlund felt like, for the amount of money they paid, he's got to be the main guy. You've now brought in a guy who... They're both similar in a lot of ways. They both want to attack the box. They both want to run beyond. But it's probably the first signing I think United have made under Ten Hag that suits this transition football style. Xerxes not going to come and get the ball. He wants to run beyond the last man. Bruno Fernandes is going to pick it up and he's going to hit him long. I think that maybe speaks to the identity and the style they want to go for. High line transition football rather than this heavy possession-based, sometimes transition football.
Yeah, but I also think this is a great sign for Manchester United because who was Højlund's backup last year as a striker? Didn't really have one. Rashford have to play centrally. And so this is a great sign, and they can compete for the starting spot. I don't think they can coexist in the same starting 11, but it's a great squad sign for Manchester United, who seems to be going in the right direction. He's a player that has so many great attributes and adheres to the philosophy that Ten Hag's put forward in terms of that transitional football. Didn't play too much in the Euros, but he's a player that's got immense quality, and you expect him and Højlund to compete for that starting spot up top from Man United.
Yeah, make a really good point. Sam, we were sort of talking about these potential incomings, Mazraoui, de Ligt. Obviously, United have been fairly active so far. What are now the key areas that they really need to target?
I think it depends on their outgoings. Like we've said, they've got left-backs in Shaw and Malacia, but Malacia has been out for a long time due to injury. It'll be interesting to see how he comes back into the fold. But then when you look into their midfield, obviously Kobbie Mainoo had a great Euros and he was really good for United at the back end of last season. But Casemiro, he's another one. Are we sure of what his future is going to be like? Mason Mount was out with injury. He's already seems to be up to speed now. Erik Ten Hag and the players are talking about how well he's doing during pre-season. When you look out wide, what's the future of Sancho? Rashford maybe, but Sancho especially, he's been linked with a few teams. Does his future, change how they attack the market for wide players? I think it really depends on the players leaving first and then United knowing how they do that, because they don't want to have a position where they're, in like other windows where they're looking for players but they've struggled to get rid of players, and then they're in a position where they have to just say, yeah, we're happy with the squad that we have, even though we know they're looking on the market.
Yeah. Someone who's definitely staying, Harry Maguire. He's been quite vocal about, look, I'm kind of part of the future of this club. Really upset to miss the back end of last season as well, missed the FA Cup final, missed the Euros as well.
I mean, firstly, let's put some respect on his redemption arc, because he was pretty much done, and he became the scapegoat of the club. I think a lot of people said him and Ten Hag fell out. We don't know how much truth is in that, and it felt like the writing was on the wall. Then the back end of last season, the moment he got injured, everyone said, this is the end of Manchester United's season without Maguire, who suddenly became this massive important figure. I don't think they can lose him, because they don't want to be in a situation like last year. If Lissandro picks up an injury, then you're left with Euro and Maguire, potentially, or Euro and Evans. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. And I think also he is actually a very good footballer, and I think people have now regained that respect for him, and I think he's now in a position where he can actually say, I want to stay.
Do you think it will be Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who's one of these players that United are going to have to kind of get out the door in order to bring other players in? Because it looks like a move to West Ham is likely for him. Yeah,
Wan-Bissaka's been a great servant for Manchester United. We know how good he is defensively going forward. He lacks a little bit of something, but for West Ham, that'd be a great sign. And then Manchester United, I think, have established that Dalot is their starting right-back going forward. He's a player that, on his days, got so much talent and can go forward and create for Manchester United. That's something that Aaron Wan-Bissaka can't do. And in modern football, you need your fullbacks to be able to attack and give you that impetus out wide. And so he's a player that can garner a decent fee, and you expect him to leave Manchester United this summer and go to a club that's going to be competing for European places, because he's a player that has got quality, but Man United is just going in a different direction right now.
I feel like West Ham would be sort of a good place for him to go.
Yeah, I think so. A team that, have been in Europe before, they're pushing for those positions. He's got 1 year left on his contracts. Like Kwaku said, it makes sense for both parties, because they're looking for other right-backs. He's been in a constant position where he's been battling with Dalot, and at points it's made him better. I think that competition's been healthy, but at the same time, as a player, you want to start week in, week out, gain confidence and get better. And the player we saw at Palace, we were raving about him and how good he is, even going forward at times as well, but defensively one of the best 1v1 defenders. So I'd like to see that week in, week out again.
Before we move on, by the way, a word on David De Gea, who is still a free agent. Doesn't look like he's going to Genoa, does it? But it's all linked to the wage demands.
I don't know what's going on. We were literally speaking off air saying, bear in mind, we were talking about this guy being a Premier League great. Can't get a club. He's like, I don't know.
Or is he just being too picky about the club that he...
Potentially, but how many years has he got left to play football? That would be my question. And is he going to eventually settle back in Spain? I thought he might have just gone home, potentially gone home for a year.
He stayed in Manchester, hasn't he?
Yeah, but Man City weren't going to sign him. So, I don't know, it's just a really strange scenario.
I've never seen it before in terms of player of this much quality. I know the last couple of years Manchester United maybe tarnished that a little bit, but he's one of the greatest Premier League goalkeepers of all time. If you look at his resume, and the fact that he's been without a club, it's now going to be 2 seasons, it doesn't make any sense, and there must be something awry when it comes to maybe his wage demands, or maybe the football's gone in a different direction. He's not necessarily the most comfortable with the ball at his feet.
But still, he's a good goalkeeper.
I think he's just waiting for that perfect move, because it was most likely going to be his last move, and we've never seen it before, but fair play. If he wants to, bide his time and say, yeah, I want to make sure